Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of Allerdale Borough Council. My name is Lee Jardine and I'm the Democratic Services Officer, and for the purpose of this meeting I'm also the host. I'll be assisting the committee with the use of technology to manage the process of the meeting. I will not have any control of the meeting and the meeting will not begin until instructed by the Chair. This meeting is currently being live streamed via YouTube and a recording will be made available afterwards. Everyone who has indicated they're attending has now joined. The meeting will be locked. Shortly, I'll hand you over to the Chair, but first, introductions. Can I ask the attendees to introduce themselves, starting with the members? Councillor Annison.
Councillor Annison.
Councillor Granger.
Councillor Malcolm Granger.
Councillor Greeny.
Councillor Ian Greeny, I'll be chair for the meeting today.
Councillor Heaslip.
Good afternoon, Michael Heaslip, Councillor.
Councillor Scott.
Good afternoon, Councillor Paul Scott.
Councillor Semple.
Good afternoon, Councillor Andy Semple.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the officers. Nick Hardy.
Good afternoon, I'm Nick Hardy. I'm the Head of Strategy, Policy and Performance.
Alex Fitzgerald.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Fitzgerald, Policy Manager, Corporate Performance and Information.
Ian Hind.
Hello, I'm Ian Hind. I'm the Policy Officer for Scrutiny and Partnerships.
Kevin Kerrigan.
Good afternoon, I'm Kevin Kerrigan, Programme Director for Workington.
And Lindsay Tomlinson.
Good afternoon, Lindsay Tomlinson, Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Thank you. We also have Johnny from Communications on the meeting. Thanks all for your introductions. Please remain on mute throughout the meeting unless intending to speak. To speak, please can members use the raised hand icon to indicate they wish to speak and only speak when requested by the Chair. If applicable, to vote on items, the Chair will ask myself as Democratic Services Officer to go through each member alphabetically. Each member will reply with their name and I vote for, against or abstain. So I'll now formally hand you over to the Chair to start the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I would just like to add Councillor McCadden Holmes has just joined the meeting as well. Thank you. This is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, 16th of October 2020. And we will start the meeting. The meeting is now open. Item 1 on the agenda, minutes from the previous meeting. It's to sign as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of August 2020. Do we have any comments on that and do we have a seconder for that, please? No comments, and I have a seconder from Councillor Granger. If you can log that for us, please. Thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies from the members?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies are received from Councillor Horsley, Councillor Kirkbride, Councillor Holliday, Councillor Bell, and Councillor Crouch. Councillor Crouch is replaced today by Councillor Semple. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. Item 3 on the agenda, declaration of interests. Councillor staff to give notice of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest or any other interest and the nature of that interest relating to any item on the agenda in accordance with the adopted code of conduct. Do we have any declaration of interest, please? None. Declared. Thank you. Item closed. Item 4, questions. To answer questions from members of the public submitted in writing or by electronic mail no later than 5 p.m. 2 working days before the meeting. Do we have any questions, please, Lee?
No questions received, Chair.
Thank you. Item closed. Item 5, public participation. To hear representations from members of the public on items which appear on the agenda, submitted in writing or by electronic mail no later than 5 p.m. 2 working days before the meeting.
No, we don't have any, Chair.
None at all. Okay. Item closed. Moving on to item 6. This is the Q1 Performance Report 2020 to 2021, contained on pages 7 to 32 of the agenda. And we're going to receive a presentation by Officer Alex Fitzgerald, who's going to give a brief presentation. I would ask that any members who have any questions relating to the item, keep them till the end to allow Officer Fitzgerald to complete the presentation, if that's okay. Thank you. Hand over to you, Alex, if that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. If you bear with me, I will attempt to share my screen so that we can look through the report as we go. I'm hoping that's worked for everybody.
Yeah.
So corporate performance report, members will be reasonably familiar with these reports. So we get a quarterly performance report. This particular report that you're looking at today relates to Q1 and is slightly tardy coming to you as a committee just because of scheduling really of meetings, unfortunately. So it will be swiftly followed in November by Q2. But this particular one then relates to the period April to the end of June. If members look at page 11 onwards, that really gives you the main body of the report. And as usual, what we've done is set out an overview, which is then followed by some more detail on each of the items in the report. The report is based on the interim delivery plan, which sets out some key projects and activities, as well as key performance indicators for the year. And those are set out in more detail on pages 13 onwards. On page 11, as I said, we've got a high-level overview of projects and activities and key performance indicators, and there's a table there that just gives you a summary of where everything was at the end of Q1. You'll see from that that the majority of projects and activities we're reporting as green, which just means they're on track, they're where people were expecting them to be. We do have 6 that we're reporting as either amber or red. And then likewise with the key performance indicators, you've got a quick summary there, which tells you that 17 indicators that had a target attached to them were reporting as green, which meant they were on target. We've got 5 that were amber, which means they're just very slightly off the target, and 2 that were reporting as red. There are some indicators that we're following this year that have not had a target set against them, and that's partly because of the situation we're in this year, whereas normally we might have set a target for something such as leisure centre usage. Obviously, the leisure centres have been closed for the early part of this financial year, and it was quite difficult to set targets in the normal way against some of those types of indicators. So whilst we're still tracking performance, what we want to see with things like that is just that usage steadily increases through the year, and it was very difficult to set any sort of meaningful target against that. So we do have more than usual that don't have a specific target set against them, but you'll see that we're aiming to either increase or decrease within the report. Just a bit further down this page, there's a couple of paragraphs that just give you a very quick overview of where some things are going well and where we do have some issues being reported, which I'll just pick up as I go through. And again, with performance indicators, just a bit of a breakdown there, just to give you a sense of how many that had targets set against them, so we can use the red, amber, green rating. We're reporting as green, amber and red. Just to have a quick run through the actual sections. I'll make that a little bit smaller so we can see what we're doing. So the report's broken down into the 6 themes in the council strategy, and for each of those you've got more detail on these next pages. Gives you a bit of a narrative update about where we are with each of those projects and activities. I should say they are a mixture of what you might call more formal projects that will have some more detailed project management information that sits behind them and are being managed through our programme office with more detailed performance reports and project management processes that sit with them, alongside what I would describe more as just some key activity that we're not managing as a project as such, but it is key activity that potentially one or more service areas are undertaking. And you will see a mixture in here for this year, obviously, of things that we had planned to do anyway, but also things that have been driven by the current pandemic situation. So there's activity within this that relates to that. So just running through the format, so you're familiar with what you're looking at. So each of those has projects and activities followed by a set of performance indicators. And what you're being presented with in terms of performance indicators is what the position was last year, where that's applicable, and then a Q1 actual, a little arrow that tells you whether that is up, down, about the same as either last quarter or the comparable period last year, and then what the overall target for the year has been set at. So you'll see on this page, for example, if you look at the NNDR collection rate and the council tax collection rate, the figures, the first figure is the figure for last year that we achieved. The second figure with the colour behind it is the Q1 actual position. And the arrow on these ones actually relates to a comparison to this time last year. So where are we at the end of Q1 compared to where we were last year? So in terms of where we wanted to be, that amber indicates we're just slightly off where we wanted to be at the end of Q1. And the downward arrow also indicates that that is below where we were this time last year, which, given what is going on this year, will probably not come as a surprise to members that these are slightly down on where we'd like to be. So the same format throughout. So in terms of cleaner, greener, again, a set of projects and activities, followed by a set of indicators. And again, on some of these, you'll see we haven't set a specific target. So for example, on number of fly tipping incidents, there's no actual target set as such. But we are obviously wanting to reduce that. And again, those give you an indication of what the total was last year and where we are for Q1 and whether that is better or worse. So as we move through those, there is a slightly off target missed bin collection data there, but it is important to realise that that does still represent 99.9% of bins being picked up on their scheduled day of collection. So it is a very, very tight target that is set on that bin collection, and it does not represent a huge number of bins that are being missed overall. Working through, we have got a couple of ambers on projects and activities here, and there's an explanation given for those. Amber indicates it's not really where we wanted it to be, but we have a plan to do something about it. Again, if I move through, we have one project that's being reported as red, which is the Arcus Project, which has suffered some setbacks in terms of actually implementing that, but it is moving forward. There have been some significant setbacks, but there are plans in place, and it is as described there, moving forward, although at a much slower pace than we had originally anticipated. But that is a huge project to transfer IT systems across a whole range of service areas. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but obviously if members have particular questions, we can try and answer those, or we can certainly get you more information on any of these after the meeting. There are one or two, I was going to point out one here, one or two indicators that have been affected by the pandemic in possibly ways that we didn't immediately foresee. So this one would be one that I would point out. So this is percentage of council spend on goods and services, but less than £50,000. So that's sort of small to medium areas of spend. Previously, that's been doing very well, that indicator. It's actually been affected, certainly in Q1, by the need to purchase PPE in particular, and we've had to get that obviously from wherever we can get that. So demand has been very high for personal protective equipment, and obviously that's impacted our ability to spend more locally, which is what we usually would like to try and do. So we'd hope to see improvement over Q2, Q3 in terms of, usually our aim is to spend locally if we can. And again, just working through the final section, resilient communities. Again, a whole range of activity there. Some delays reported in delivering the hardship fund, but that is up and running now. That's the additional support going through council tax reduction scheme. And again, some areas we've got, performance is holding up, which is good. So in terms of benefits processing times, we're hitting the targets, which is obviously important to people at the moment. So a mixture of performance, but on the whole, where everyone was wanting to be, we've got some areas that have dipped slightly below target. And I'll hand back to you, Chair, for if there's any particular questions.
Okay, thank you, Alex. If you can just give me my screen back, please. I've got a raised hand off Councillor Semple. Would you like to ask the question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks very much. I think it's a really good report. A comment, first of all, then a question. A comment, really, a lot of things that are green, of course, aren't really green, are they? I mean, they might be green. You mean that they're green in terms of you feel you're controlling them from a management point of view, but there's a lot of things on here where we simply don't know. But my question is about, on page 10, operating model. I've been looking through all the information here. I'm concerned about vulnerable groups, so I completely understand and support cloud-based, IT-based, everything online. But to throw in an example, I represent Cockermouth, where we have the library still closed. It's a hub for County Council, for the Town Council, for Allerdale. There's nowhere in Cockermouth that somebody can go to, right? So what I would say is, or what I would ask is, there isn't any mention about what Allerdale is going to do about vulnerable groups. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point. Alex, would you like to come back on that, or just consider it for future?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, in terms of specific activity around more vulnerable groups, I mean, there obviously are some of our service areas that do work directly with people who are suffering particular issues, such as the homelessness team, or those, needing to claim benefits, for example. In terms of the operating model, colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, my understanding is not that although we do want to move with the times, there is a drive to do more things digitally, etc. And there are obviously benefits for customers as well as ourselves for doing that, but it doesn't suit everybody. And I suppose that's just that awareness that there is still a need for some physical presence in places, because people do need that sort of face-to-face support sometimes. Whilst some people will be very happy to do things online as much as possible, because it saves them time, etc. For other people, we are aware that doesn't necessarily suit. And some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about actually shortly on the resilient community strategy does probably cut across a little bit into what Councillor Semple's asked about in terms of supporting communities.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Councillor Heaslip, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to make a point which Andy Semple touched upon, and that is that when you look at the first theme, the financially secure council, and we've got a lot of green things there, the person in the street might look at that and think, are they crazy? Recovery plans for income generating services, impacts of COVID-19 crisis. So now that can't be green, and it depends what you're looking at. If this is a management report, which I suspect it is, then it's green in the sense that people are working on that, and those plans to work on that are going as well as can be expected. So the output of that is looks like it might be green. But if we're looking at this not as managers but as an overview and scrutiny committee, what our focus should really be is the risk to outcomes. And there's a massive risk to outcomes there with the financial impacts of COVID-19 and our specific income generating services, which is hidden behind that and not reflected in what you would give a green rating. If you're looking about the potential impact on the council of those things, it's massive. And if you're looking at, do we actually know how we're going to solve these problems hand on heart and get back on financial track, then I suspect none of us would say absolutely that we are certain that we can actually deal with this. The financial losses from COVID are not recoverable within the course of 12 months. So there's a massive risk to outcomes, and there's also we can't be confident the plausibility of what we're doing is actually appropriate to the task, because it's unprecedented. Which raises the point that I was going to make, that we did, I think, when we talked about our work programme, have an item where we were going to discuss with Nick and Alex a performance management framework that maybe better reflected what we want to see from an overview and a scrutiny in terms of outcomes perspective, rather than simply reporting that the managers are on top of the short-term tasks they've been given. We need to take a much longer-term view of the risks to the whole operational future and the outcomes for the community. And I think that seems to have disappeared off our work programme list. I thought we'd agreed to do it, but it just the fact that all appears to be green when we know we've got major problems there suggests that we maybe need to have a discussion with the officers about what a performance management framework that actually reflects the sort of things that overview and scrutiny is interested in, like outcomes, rather than just checking whether the managers are on top of the jobs or not. I've got a couple of more questions to come up later on, but I'll leave that point for now.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'm not sure if you want to come back on that, Alex. I think there's more of a statement from Mike as such in terms of performance management and future reflection in terms of the work programme and whether we need to consider that. We might cover it under that.
May I just come back in, Chair, for a brief second?
Yeah. Yes,
just in terms of, we did have a conversation at Scrutiny in the not too distant past. It was in Hallidale House, so it was probably before April, where I did bring a paper asking Scrutiny for their comments on what the future performance management framework might look like in terms of the work since then. So what we've done recently is we've made an appointment internally within the council to appoint a project officer to take forward the development of a new performance management framework. The intention of that new performance management framework is to be delivered from April next year. So we have an officer on that. I'm quite happy that when that document is ready and when those discussions are timely to come back to Scrutiny and to have that conversation, I would encourage any member who has any interest in the performance management framework and has any ideas and any suggestions as to how it can be improved and any thoughts, that if they make contact directly with Ian Brogden, I'm sure he'd only be too delighted to have a conversation with them about the format of that framework will look in the future.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. You happy with that, Mike? Great. Councillor Granger, Malcolm, would you like to come in with the question?
Cheers, Ian. Thank you very much. Alex, overall, how are we doing? Are we holding our own, or are we having some defects due to this coronavirus issue? How do you feel in your own mind of minds? Not your paperwork. How do you feel as though we're going on?
That's a touchy-feely one for you, Alex.
I think it's a mixed picture, to be honest. I mean, as Councillor Heaslip points out, yes, there are some significant issues that are being created for us as an organisation and us as an area by the current pandemic situation. And that is translating itself into considerable amounts of officer time being spent on things that we didn't know that we were going to be doing this year, for example. and obviously is having an impact in different ways on different service areas. We've got demand, you know, we saw demand fall in some areas, rise in other areas, and now it's sort of leveling off again in some areas, but there's obviously still higher demand in some areas. That just means that this is not a normal year, and that goes back to my point about it being difficult to set meaningful targets on some things this year, really, because where you would normally set a target based on how did we do in previous years and do we want to do it better, or are we happy with that sort of level of service, this is not a normal year. So it is having huge implications for us, and the constantly changing nature of things is making it quite tricky to plan ahead and to work out exactly what the demand's going to look like in 3 months' time, 2 months' time, 6 months' time. So it is not normal circumstances. And again, as Councillor Heath alluded to, we do have some, as all councils do, significant financial implications of the current situation. So at the same time, we also have services that are continuing to deliver well in terms of the services that we deliver as a district council, and some significant projects that are moving ahead. You'll have seen the stuff around Workington that Kevin is going to talk a bit more about, and further bids going in for Maryport, for example, you know, in terms of those regeneration projects. So there is progress on some of those bigger schemes, as well as usual day-to-day work continuing well in some areas, as well as additional work. I mean, some teams, you know, like the homeless team, have done amazing work in terms of responding to the call to get all rough sleepers off the streets and house them and deal with normal caseload, etc. So it's a mixed picture. But it is, not an insubstantial challenge at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Scott, you've got a question. Would you like to come in there, Paul, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First on, just touching on what Councillor Semple said about the vulnerable. I sort of agree with that on the concept of our offices losing our face-to-face, really. So, I mean, I'm not going to go too much into that, but I think there's a lot of people out there without digital, and we need to remember those, especially in these times. And we need to have some kind of face-to-face option available for them, as far as I look at. But I just also noticed the payment of Cumbrian businesses. We were at amber. Is there any specific reason for that? Obviously, in a time of needs like this, that we've managed to shortfall payment our Cumbria businesses on time. That isn't good, certainly at this time.
Okay. Is that one for yourself, Nick, or is it you, Alex, with regards to the business payments?
I don't have an answer. I will get back to Councillor Scott.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. Malcolm, you've got your hand up. Is it from the previous time, or?
You're on mute, Councillor.
You're on mute, Malcolm. You're on mute.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Alex, on page 21, the other day I had reason to ring Allerdale House and I couldn't get through. Once you got onto the 702 numbers, it just blanked you completely. And I tried for quite a while, and eventually I had Jill Owen's mobile number, so I rang it, and she made contact through her computer, and she got in touch with Paul Woods and Keith, whatever they call him, I don't know. But it took Keith till 2:30 in the afternoon to get back to me. That was from about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of people were trying to get in, and a lot of people weren't getting through. We should have a fail-safe number somewhere where you can ring if there's a problem. But we haven't at the moment. It's these 702 numbers, and you just couldn't get into them. And what can we do about it to try and fix it?
I think I would say, Councillor Granger, that we do. I mean, if you ring the general number for the council, the customer services number, there is an option there to get a call back. If you want to have a call back, if customers are trying to ring on the customer services number, there is an option to have a call back. I certainly know from the figures that we have had increasing volumes of calls over this certainly quarter 1 and slightly into quarter 2. And actually the call abandon rate, which is what the figure is here, which is people sort of hanging up and not coming back, is better than it has been for some time. Certainly from a customer ringing the customer services line, in theory at the moment is easier for them to get through, but there's also the option of having a ring back if you don't want to wait. So that's the options for customers ringing in.
It wasn't a good day that day, and even the town council office couldn't get through. It was all to do with the 01900 702 number, and it just wasn't working. But they got it going eventually, but it took a long time, and people get frustrated and annoyed.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Thank you, Alex.
Councillor Anderson, Tony, would you like to come into the question there, please?
Thanks, Chair. This is a question for Alex. Yeah, you intimated earlier, as a function of the council, that we support people that are in difficulties with council tax. Now, obviously, you've got a high percentage of collection rates. There's a number of questions in there. How much does that reflect on the green, the percentage of the shortfall with the number of people being assisted? Is there we've obviously, as I said, it's a function of the Allerdale Council to support people in difficulties. Of course it is, and that reflects on what Councillor Heaslip and Councillor Semple said earlier. And is there a medium to long-term plan of the shortfall, and how will it impact? And are there any red, amber, greens in terms of impact that would have on the performance of the council?
Alex?
There obviously is, with all of these, there is more data that sits behind them. Collection rates are going to be an issue this year, because we know that we have people, businesses and residents who are going to be struggling this year. So there'll be more of a projection. I would probably refer members to the quarterly finance reports, which give you a bit more detail around projected collections, and we'll make that into a sort of monetary value for you, so you can see what that actually indicates. But it is going to be a challenging year in terms of how best to support people, but accepting that it is a source of income for us as well. But we know we will have people who are struggling to pay their council tax this year.
Thank you, Alex. Councillor Semple, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just really a supplementary to the question I had before, and also a comment about resilient communities, which I'll do first of all. I mean, the headlines for what we mean by resilient community, again, it's a bit like Councillor Heaslip said, you read that section and it's like, you know what I mean? The key things that are impacting on COVID, need to be there. But my question is, going back to the vulnerable groups. So before I was released on good behaviour from DWP, I used to agree with local authorities support for people who couldn't get online. Allerdale delivered that on behalf of DWP, and my understanding is that if you can't get online, Allerdale give the help and support. So what I wanted to say before, Chair, was where are we with that? If Allerdale aren't doing any public facing, how are people getting help to go online? Surely what we should be doing, everybody should be doing, is making sure 100% of people can get online. Thank you.
Yeah, I must admit, I think that's a fairly good point, Councillor Semple. I agree with you, to be honest. I think it's somewhere we could definitely improve in, I think, giving people access to online capability. We definitely need to, because we usually find out it's the more deprived areas that usually suffer in that respect. Thanks for that, Annie. Councillor Heaslip, would you like to come back in with a question? You're on mute, Mike, please.
Sorry, Chair, I've got 2 or 3 questions, but if you want, I'll just take them one at a time.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Put my hand up again.
No problem. Just run through them if you like, Mike.
Okay, the first one is on the Cleaner Greener Allerdale on page 15. Progress strategic green infrastructure. We had a strategic green infrastructure project based on work in Den Hall and the parklands, which ran into some difficulty with Heritage Lottery Fund, although it was a pretty well worked up project that was, you know, in total worth maybe a couple of million quid, which would have actually transformed that as green infrastructure and made quite a difference to the attractiveness of the place and to the benefit of working to that. It may well be that, I don't know the answer to this question, it may well be that we're stuck with the Heritage Lottery Fund problem there, but I wouldn't want that large strategic green infrastructure project to be just kind of missed. It's not referred to in the note. I'm not expecting either Alex or Nick to know the answer to the question, but I'd like to be reassured that we haven't lost sight of that and that it is still going ahead when the circumstances permit. That was my first question.
We'll get you an answer, Mike.
Please.
Yeah, we'll get an answer. I haven't got an answer.
Thank you. Mike, would you like to continue?
Right, okay. Next one is, when I find it, on Investor Grow on page 18, the Reedlands Road situation, which, if I recall rightly, was originally on our work programme. We took it off our work programme on the basis that, well, if it all goes wrong, we can bring it back as an exception. Well, it looks like it's all gone wrong. The description in the notes here don't actually reflect what I understand of the latest situation, where the executive has now decided that the projects, the value for money and so on, doesn't stack up, which is fair enough. Whether they're right on that or not, I don't know. I'll leave that to the audit committee to determine. But my question is that if it's not going to go ahead in the original format, we've still got a site in the middle of an industrial estate that on the face of it looks quite valuable and must have looked quite valuable for somebody to decide it was worth building industrial units on it. If that can't happen, what's our plan B for that site? Because we can't just leave it derelict and rotting away like it's been rotting away for the last 40 years. We need to have a plan to do something with the site that maybe doesn't involve the ground condition works that looks like there's scuppered the plan to build industrial units on it. We must put our thinking caps on and find an alternative use for the site. Even if it was to make a little public park in the middle of an industrial estate, wouldn't necessarily be a completely daft idea. A bit of green space, but we can't just leave it to rot. It's our land, it's our responsibility. We need to have a plan to do something with it that wouldn't actually require maybe the building of substantial industrial units or something. You know, might make a nice car park if there was a demand for car park in that area. I don't know, but I think I'd ask officers to put the thinking caps on and come up with something, please.
Yeah. Okay, Mike. Did you have one more, did you say? You're on mute, Mike.
Sorry, one more. Page 21. Ensure Aldale Waste Services delivered against performance targets, which we've given a green. But then if you look at the financial information that we don't usually get, and I don't really understand how we can do a performance review without looking at the finance information that goes alongside it, which goes to executive, we will see that we might be meeting performance targets, but there's a major risk there in that we are, when you look at the financial information, several hundreds of thousands of pounds away from our financial targets. So that illustrates the point I was making about, Allerdale Waste Services might be doing the job, but actually we are way off our projected financial targets, would have a major effect on the budget, viability of the budget that we need to draw up next year. That's a comment. My question is, you'll see the comment starts off with the phrase, a partnering board has been established. What's a partnering board, please?
Alex, I think that's one for you, is it?
I would need to check the exact terms of reference, but my understanding is it's a meeting really between client and contractor, really to discuss any contracting issues and consider performance.
Can I just come back on that, Chair?
Yes.
I think so. It basically is just a contract meeting between the client and the contractor, a regular contract meeting. And I think the danger with using a phrase like partnering board is it appears to give it a status as if it's some kind of governance institution or official part of the council procedures, where actually it's just a meeting between the client and the contractor. I think there's a danger in using the word partnering board. Okay. I think it just over-eggs the thing completely if it's basically just a contract meeting. I'll just make that observation.
Okay, then, Mike. Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the members, please?
Councillor Scott did have his hand up. I just want to check that he lowered it himself.
It's not there now.
No, I did lower it myself. I was just, we were at the time talking about the face-to-face contact and the phone calls. And I was just going to point out that last year we had face-to-face contact and we took 54,195 calls. However, this year we have no face-to-face contact and we've actually took less calls by 7,500. So I was just highlighting the fact that even though we haven't got it now, we're still taking less calls than we were last year. That was all really.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Do we have any other questions for Alex?
I was about to say, Chair, but I thought we'd lost Alex, but I see she's reappeared. So.
I was going to raise my hand, but since there's no other people raising their hands, I'll ask my question, please, Alex. Mine's more specific, really. It's project specific on page 20 with regards to the Arcus Land and Property System project. Just reading through that, you know, I look at words like one of the largest projects, complexity of project, revised timescales and resource requirements. And I think the thing that concerns me and jumps out at me is if we're looking to revise timescales and resources, that obviously has a significant impact on balance. And can you give us some idea of what that impact would be with regards to financial impact in terms of revising that project scale and increasing the resources over the original estimate? Do we know that offhand, or is it something that you'd have to look into, Alex, please?
I'm afraid I haven't got that level of detail. I mean, there's obviously some project management information and methodology and much more detail that sits behind that. We can certainly get an update for you if you would find that useful from. I think
it would be useful, given that it is one of the larger projects, and we are seeing a significant push to the right on that with significant increased resources. You know, that always intimates significant cost rises to me.
Yep.
Thank you.
Chair, it just occurs to me, I just very quickly, I wonder if it's worth a 30-second description of how the performance report is put together, because it sounds like Alex and Nick should have all the answers, but to understand how the report is compiled might be just useful. I just wondered if Alex just wanted to give a 30-second description of how that comes about.
I can do. I mean, it's one of the reasons that it's useful if, because the information comes from all over the organisation, really. So it comes from teams and project managers across the entire organisation. So it's not something that I know the ins and outs of absolutely everything. I mean, I know little bits about most of it, but I won't know the detail that sits behind absolutely all of it. It's useful for me and probably for yourselves to make this more productive. If when you get sight of the report, if there are any particular areas like Councillor Greeny has just raised that you can sort of pick out early on, it either means that we could get something for you prior to the meeting, or that we could arrange for a particular person to come to the meeting if it was some area you wanted to delve into in particular. You could actually have a sort of topic specialist who could maybe help you with that at the meeting. Obviously, it does cover a huge breadth of stuff across the organisation, so we can't have a cast of thousands at every single meeting. But if there are particular things that occur to you when you do get your papers, it might be useful if you want to flag those up with Ian or myself in advance, and we can do our best to maybe get a little bit more detail behind some of those things for you.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Alex. And I must admit, Ian did actually request any pre-questions, so I can only apologise for that, Alex, sorry. Do we have any other questions, please, from the members? With that, I'll close item 6, if that's okay, and we'll move on to item 7. Developing a resilient community strategy, and this is pages 33 to 40 on the agenda, and to consider the approach being followed to develop this strategy. And the recommendation is to note this report. And I think, are you just going to give a brief overview, Alex, in terms of the report and the outline of it?
I am, yes, Chair. And can I just say in advance, I did lose my internet connection there momentarily, so I did miss a little bit of that last part of that conversation. So if I do disappear, I apologise in advance. I'm not quite sure whether it's gonna hold out, but so if I stop talking, that's why, and I do apologise.
No problem. Thank you.
So this report is really just to give you a summary of where we're up to. We've obviously been starting some work to develop a resilient community strategy, which would sit underneath the resilient communities theme in the council strategy, and just flesh that out a bit more, really. So the report at page 33 onwards just gives you an overview of some initial thinking and some work we've done so far, just to look at what we mean by resilient communities, what is broadly meant by resilience and by communities, what we mean by resilient communities maybe as an organisation in this context, and just some thoughts really around what the evidence seems to be telling us at the moment, and where the sort of areas of focus are that we think we may want to include in that strategy. So it is still very much a work in progress. The idea is that this just gives you an opportunity as a committee to sort of feed in any thoughts you have at this point. We obviously still have more work to do in terms of sharing this more broadly, talking to some community groups in particular around their thoughts on this topic as well. So really, if I just give you a quick overview of what's in the report, I'm hoping you've had a chance to read it. Following the introduction, really at 4.1 to 4.9, there's just a summary of some thinking really around what we mean by resilience and what we mean by communities, really. There's obviously huge amounts of information out there, and lots of research papers and lots of thinking and very in-depth 50-page documents that discuss the definition of resilience. And obviously we probably don't want to spend an hour debating that, but I think for me the key points around resilience, when we're talking about community resilience, and we are probably talking mostly in terms of geographical communities in this context, rather than communities of interest, is that idea that I've put in there from Northumbria University, about that idea of bouncing back and bouncing forward. So it's that idea of resilience being about how well a community can adapt to maybe a sudden shock, like a flooding situation or this pandemic situation, but also how generally a community is, how strong a community is, and how well able a community is and the people in it are to deal with the sort of slower changes and the fact that they may need to adapt to something that is going to change in the longer term. And that might be societal changes or changes to work types, that kind of thing. So then at 4.2 4.10 to 4.17, there's just a bit of information there, some quite sort of summarised information really about what the sort of picture is within our area and what the picture was before the pandemic happened, and then what we're sort of picking up as some of the implications of that. And I suppose the key point really is it suggests a lot of what's happened has really magnified some of the things that we were already seeing. So where we saw inequalities across our different communities, whether that's in income levels or health outcomes, those have really been magnified by the pandemic situation, and that's happened across the entire country. You'll have seen all sorts of things about how you know, those in more deprived areas across the country have been worse affected in terms of health outcomes from COVID-19, and obviously all the impact in terms of economic impact and work and potential loss of work for some people is going to pile pressure on some people who are maybe already on a lower income or in a job that was less secure. I think also there's a key point in there, I think at 4.15, which recognises that we have some significant strengths within our communities as well. And again, the pandemic situation has really underlined the way that communities have come together. There's been an absolutely amazing amount of new community groups that have grown up across the area to support people in terms of food deliveries and picking up prescriptions for people and that kind of thing. And that just goes to talk to the strength in some senses of our communities as well. So that's not in any way to be forgotten in all of this. Obviously, we may understand all of that in terms of the context and in terms of what resilience means or doesn't mean to some people. The trickier bit is obviously working out what on earth we do about it as an organisation. And so from 4.18 to the end of the report, really, that's just trying to set out some areas of focus that we might think about as an organisation, drawn a bit from what we've already said in the council strategy, but just thinking about, you know, if we know we've got health inequalities across our area, and we know that the pandemic has sort of underlined the importance of health and health outcomes, you know, that idea that we would have a role in healthy active lifestyles seems to follow from that. We've talked a bit about vulnerable people and those sorts of inequalities we have across our communities as well. So it seems logical as well. We know that people are going to be hit differently by this situation, and we're already struggling in some areas. So what do we do about that as an organisation, and what is our role as a district council? And then we've talked a bit about community safety and environment, and that idea that, you know, it is important, you know, where somebody lives and what the place looks like, and their open spaces and their access to open spaces and their feelings of safety and their feelings of being able to get out and about. Again, the situation we've all been in the lockdown has magnified the importance of our open spaces and our public places. So that seems like an important area for us as well. And then there's an area where we've talked about engaging, involving, collaborating and empowering. Again, this is really saying, you know, do we as an organisation need to do a bit more in terms of being a bit more outward facing and potentially engage more with our communities and potentially engage better with our partner organisations? And again, it's about how do we do that, I suppose. And I'd be interested in any thoughts members have, and particularly any thoughts members have about their role as members and where they see themselves fitting with that, really, and how we can improve flows of information or conversations. So really, as I said, this is really just to give you an overview of where we're at and where we're sort of thinking. The hard part is working out what we think we should be doing as an organisation, bearing in mind that we are a district council. We don't have responsibilities for all public services. We obviously are only a small part of the picture. So I suppose the questions I've raised at 4.25 really are just to give the committee an opportunity to feed any thoughts they have in at this point. So I've sort of said, you know, do the areas of focus seem appropriate? Do they seem logical in terms of what we know about our area? Are there any other areas that members think we should be focusing on, or any areas that we shouldn't be focusing on? Maybe that's not our area as a district council. Are we trying to do too much? Because we sometimes fall into that trap. And are there any particular suggestions in terms of specific activities or actions that you think we should be taking as an organisation that could help in any of those areas, or any other areas that you think we should be working on? Obviously, there's already been mention of how do we support more vulnerable people and what is our role in that. So it was, as I said, just an opportunity for members to add any thoughts at this point, or any suggestions as to other areas we should be looking at.
Thank you, Alex. I've got a question from Councillor Semple. Would you like to come in there, Andy?
Thanks. I've just had an introduction of my Labrador Riley, so hopefully I'll stay down there. Thanks very much. This is really, it's really good that you're welcoming my ideas. I have two points to make, really. I think, for me, I know tons of people, younger people in their 30s, who are working from home, right? Working from home. You've got women who are almost chained within them. The home is really now so different, the concept of the home, and loneliness, right? The kind of contradictory things. People I'm particularly bothered about, like, single people maybe don't have the network, and all the rest of it. So there's something about loneliness which I don't see. I think we talk a lot about communities and stuff, but I think loneliness is a big thing. And the second point I'd make is so Harris Park is just around the corner from me, really well used by people in Cockermouth. Allerdale have got like a tennis court and a sort of hard court area there. Okay, the only way you'd know it was Allerdale is because it's got signs up with Allerdale logo on and saying don't do this, don't do that. There's an opportunity there, isn't there, for Allerdale to do something, right? Once we start getting out of the pandemic, yeah. And I don't think that it's a resource that's used enough. So anyway, I'm rambling on a bit now, Chair, but thank you.
No. Thanks for the comment, Andy. Do we have any other questions from the members, please? Councillor Easley, you've got a question there, Mike? You're on mute, Mike, by the way.
I was just going to say in response to Andy that maybe what we should be doing with Harris Park is giving it to Cockermouth Town Council, which is more community-based than we are, and let them run these activities in Harris Park, which fits in with the idea, I think, and I welcome it from Alex, that this isn't about what we as a council are going to do to you. It's about how we as a council can help you do things for yourselves. And all those phrases from donkeys years ago about a hand up, not a hand out, and the enabling council and so on come to mind, because I think the days are gone when we can just expect to say, right, we're the council, this is what we do, this is what you get, you can have any colour you like as long as it's black. What we need to be doing is enabling people and supporting people to actually do things collectively and individually, but particularly collectively, for themselves in their communities. And the traditional approach to crises like this, traditional regeneration approach, was to get some consultants in to do a regeneration report, and there are probably dozens of them on the shelves in Allerdale House of reports on deprivation here and problems there and so on. You ended up running an ugly contest. Who had the biggest deprivation problem, and that therefore could get it having more money. And actually, really, I really said British people, I shouldn't say British in the council meeting, should I? It really does annoy people when the only time they feature anywhere is in a kind of ugly parade of deprivation. What we need to be doing is taking an approach that looks at what assets we actually have in our communities, both physical assets, infrastructure assets, and also social assets. You know, what community groups have we got that can be helped to work rather than have everything done to people by the council? I think I welcome the, if that's where we're going with this, that it's you know, it's not give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. It's teach a man how to fish and you feed him for life. If it's that kind of approach, that we're working with communities to empower and develop them, rather than just focusing on what we do as a council, then that's great, because what we do as a council is actually quite limited. But as far as the people out there are concerned, you know, they're already unitary. It's a unitary electorate. There's only one electorate, and they make demands of the public services. And whether it's us or the council or they deal with it or whatever, they don't give a damn. It's not their problem. It's our problem to work around that. And what we need to be able to do is, yes, we need to focus on the services we provide, but we also need to be a voice for the people that we represent. Rather than just being service. If all we do is provide services, then we don't need 49 councillors. We've got a senior management team that can do that. You know, get on with it. If that's all we do, then we're wasting our time. We need to be representing the people, encouraging their ambition, encouraging their aspirations, and helping them where possible. One, to do things for themselves, and two, to engage with other organisations, lobby on their behalf for other organisations to do things as well. Polemic over.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have any other questions from the members, please? None today. I just had one, Alex. Something that you touched on in terms of there are quite a few criteria that affect resilient communities and strategy and that type of thing. And obviously, we can only affect a few of them. You know, we can't affect everything and that type of thing. And it's probably for the next phase of the work is actually identifying the significant criteria that affect the resilience community strategy, and then actually determining which ones we can actually impact on and make a significant difference to. It's just it was just a thought. Okay. As a way forward. Okay. Thank you for that, Alex. I think that's all the questions that I'm going to have on that. How does everybody feel in terms of, would anybody like a 5 or 10 minute break? Are we okay? I'm looking around for waves or no, yes or no, yes. Would you like a break there, Tony? 5 minute, 10 minute break? Councillor Semplewood. We'll take if we can take a 5 minute, 10 minute recess, if that's okay, Lee. Come back in 10 minutes.
It's your age, Andy.
It's my dog. I have to get rid of him.
Thank you.
Members, if we can just knock our cameras off and mute our mics and be back at 14:45. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, it looks like we're all back from break.
Councillor Semple doesn't appear to be there.
Are we okay to continue, Lee? Is everyone back?
Yeah, everyone appears back, Chair.
Okay. Okay, everyone. We'll resume the meeting. Just like to say thank you, Alex, for those two presentations, and I think you're free to go now if you like. That closes, that was item 7. Moving on to item 8, developing an economic growth strategy, and these are pages 41 to 174 in the actual agenda, and it's to consider the recent progress in developing this strategy. I'd like to note this, the report is for noting and progress of any developments that have been made. We're going to receive a short presentation, even though the actual document's quite long, from Nick Hardy, and also some additional input from Kevin Kerrigan with regards to the Workington Town deal. At that point, can I hand over to yourself, please, Nick? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as you said, this is an update report on where we are in terms of the progress against 3 things that we commissioned back in March this year, which seems like a long time ago when you write it down, but it doesn't feel like a long time ago when you say it out loud. So back in March, we commissioned Mott MacDonald to undertake a baseline economic analysis for us, to develop a new economic growth plan, and to develop the Workington Town investment plan to the point of submission. If I cover off where we are in terms of the baseline assessment and the economic strategy, and then I'll hand over to Kevin, who can let you know where we are in terms of the Workington Town investment plan. So inside your pack today, you have a weighted document that I don't intend to go through in any detail. I think it's probably best if members go through that in their own time, as opposed to risk potential death by PowerPoint and graphs through that document. But Mott MacDonald have completed the initial economic assessment. As you can see from the report, they've identified a number of challenges around infrastructure, business environment, places, people, etc., that they've started to coalesce those around a number of themes, and they've also identified a number of key assets and opportunities that we have, and they have put that together for us into a substantial document that really gives a really strong flavour as to what's happening in terms of the economy of Allerdale. So obviously, when we commissioned that report back in March, it was a very different economic forecast from the one that we kind of fell into in the middle of the study period. So what the report does is tries to pick up on that latest information as well that we have in terms of what the economic forecasts are in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So that's been factored into the report and identifies where we might have some vulnerabilities within the economy moving forward. So the idea of using that report then is to then develop the economic strategy itself. So the consultants have now started work on the economic strategy. We are a little bit behind schedule, which I'm sure you can understand as to why that's been. It's been quite difficult to do the consultations, etc., in the current environment, but also because we've had to do more work than probably anticipated, as Kevin will get into around the Workington Town investment plan. So the report will hopefully be completed towards the back end of this year, early in the new year, where we can bring it back to scrutiny for another look. But the plan itself, I think you can begin to see if you go through the recovery and the economic baseline. Sorry, you can start to see the positions and the points where we think that we need to really start to get involved with as a council. You can begin to see the areas where we feel that we can begin to make a difference. But what I'm really keen to explore is if members want to comment now, or if members want to have a separate conversation with me about where we think we should be looking to get involved. What I'm really keen from members is to pick up on the perspective that you're experiencing as representatives in the community that are talking to businesses, and understand how we can support those businesses going forward. And I've had a number of conversations with Councillor Grange over the last few months about some of the difficulties that businesses are facing at this moment in time. So what we really want to do is to, whilst we commissioned an economic growth strategy, this is now an economic growth and recovery strategy. And it's a subtle difference, but I think it's a fortuitous one for us in terms of the timing of the commission, because it means that we do have a great team like Mark MacDonald to take us through to the next stage, which is the recovery bit, which we didn't think we would be doing initially, but we now have to now take into our consideration. So in terms of where we are then, so phase 1 is complete in terms of that assessment. Phase 2 is started, and I'm quite happy to have, as I say, separate conversations on that with you. And I'll hand over to Kevin now, and he can tell you where we are in terms of the Workington Town Investment Plan.
Okay, thanks, Nick. And so I think members will be familiar with the concept of the town deal and the role that the Working Town Investment Plan plays in terms of bidding to government to access that up to £25 million of funding that's been made available through the town deal. Section 5 of the paper really sort of focuses on the community engagement and the consultation process we've been through in terms of developing the town investment plan. So as members will be aware, the Workington Town Deal Board was established back in January, and we've been working with the Town Deal Board to come up with the Town Investment Plan, which is intended to submit to government at the end of this month. So at the early stage of the process, the government launched a web page to support the town deal. It was #MyTown web page, and that enabled local people to submit ideas to how they could how we could improve the town aligned to the key themes of the town deal. So we felt that was a really useful channel to utilise, and we did a lot of work in promoting that website through our own social media channels, website press releases, but also through partners such as Working Town Council, Churches Together, Lakes College, Cumbria CVS, who are all represented on the board, and they used their own channels and networks to promote that web page, and we had a really good response to that consultation via the government website. So that resulted in us 82 individual submissions via the web page, which generated well over 100 individual project ideas. And actually, when you look at sort of nationally around the 101 towns that were benefit from the town deal, you know, we were in the top third of number of responses generated. So I think that was a really successful exercise. So what we've done, we then, alongside that, and the work Nick's mentioned in terms of the economic growth strategy, there were in-depth interviews undertaken with businesses, political and civic society stakeholders. We also asked partners on the board to come up with project ideas, and you know, it resulted in over 120 potential interventions being identified, which the Town Deal Board then went through a sifting exercise against the vision that the board had agreed, along as the priorities and the intervention framework identified by government for the town deal. So where that eventually got us to is 6 priority projects. I haven't gone into any detail in those in the report. If members would like any further information, happy to do that. But you may have seen them through the public consultation exercise that was ran over the last couple of weeks. You know, given current circumstances, that was largely focused on online via the website. Again, we promoted very heavily through press, social media, some posters around the town centre, and again through partner networks. And we got what I consider to be a really good response to that consultation. By the time the consultation had ended, we'd received over 500 consultation responses. The sort of overwhelming number of responses were very supportive of all of the projects. In fact, if you look at the responses, those who responded to the projects in terms of saying they either agreed or strongly agreed with the projects put forward, there was at least 55% on each of those projects. So the lowest of those was 55%, up to about 87% of support for some of the projects. So I think that demonstrated that there's a really good level of support for the projects that the Towndale Board have identified as priorities. I think I would say that that's not the end of the story in terms of consultation. The projects, by the nature of the Towndale and the Town Investment Plan, the project development is still at a high level. If government agree the Town Investment Plan, we would enter into heads of terms with government and then have a period of up to 12 months to develop detailed business cases. And the intention is there would be further consultation and engagement with our communities as we develop those business cases. That the level of engagement is probably going to depend, will differ from project to project in terms of timing and extent. Some, for example, around the projects around improving connectivity and townscape within the town centre, I'd expect a high level of engagement when we get to detailed design stage, for example. Members may be aware that the executive approved the draft plan in principle at the executive meeting this week. There will be a Towndale Board on Friday next week, and following that, the executive has delegated the final approval and submission of the Town Investment Plan to the Chief Executive and Deputy Leader in consultation with the Chair of the Towndale Board. And the aim is to submit the plan to government by the 30th of October.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Nick, are you finished?
Yeah, so I think just to say that you can see there's an awful lot of work gone on over the last few months in both the baseline assessment and the working town investment plan, which has been a challenge. I'll be honest, given the circumstances that we've had to work in. And Kevin and I have spent an awful lot of time on Teams and Zoom with consultants spread far and wide across the country, as opposed to the usual kind of sessions that we would do. But yeah, happy to take any questions that members have.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. I've had a look through the report and it's quite extensive and it's got quite a lot of information in there, and we could probably ask questions on it all day. So I'll just ask members if we can be fairly brief on the questions and keep them to a minimum, please. And I'm sure if you have any in-depth questions, we can forward them to Nick and he'll answer where appropriate. I've got a question in from Malcolm Granger. Would you like to ask your question, please, there, Malcolm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, Kevin, our biggest problem in Allerdale is we have a lack of jobs in the heavy industry. We have some brilliant young people. I've been associated just lately with Gen 2, and there's some cracking young lads and lass up there. Our biggest problem is keeping hold of them. They go away to try a job or do a job, and they never come back to Cumbria because we have nothing to hold them. Is there anywhere in the future where we can encourage large firms to bring back to Allerdale, jobs in heavy industries? Is there anything in the future? Have you got a crystal ball, Kevin?
Is it Kevin or Nick? Is that for you, Nick?
Either or. I'm not bothered.
Future investment strategies.
I'll pick it up, Kevin. Yeah. There's no crystal ball, Councillor Granger. Obviously, I think we'd appreciate within the document, and you'll appreciate within the local industrial strategy and the LEP skills plan, that the biggest challenge that we continue to face as an area is, one, that super aging population that we have. And that gives us a problem in the future of replacing the existing workforce that we have. Yeah. I think it's tens of thousands of people that we don't simply need to replace, we need to find. the economy moves forward, and that's increasingly difficult for us, especially when coupled with the skills challenge that we then face, because a lot of those jobs that we will need to replace will be at NVQ level 4, and we don't perform overly successfully as a county at NVQ level 4. So there are undoubtedly challenges for us, Councillor Granger. We're working with the LEP on how we can help and attract and retain our young people. I know the LEP have run a campaign over the last 12 months to try and encourage younger people to relocate or to stay here. I think you're right in terms of some of the opportunities, although that economy is changing. And that, we're probably starting to stand out as an area in terms of our reliance on that manufacturing sector, where other areas are moving away from that, and we just need to be cognizant of that risk and of that threat. So I think that we're always working on opportunities. We do need to look at that inward investment model going forward, particularly working with the local authorities and with the LEP. We're continually trying to get people onto our sites, whether that's Lily Hall or Roadside or wherever, but it is getting increasingly difficult.
Thank you, Nick. Got a question or hand raised off Councillor Semple. Andy, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd just like to say the report is absolutely great, really, really good. I'm always of the view that everything we do, any organisation does, should be based on empirical data, whatever you want to call it. I think it's excellent. For me, and it's kind of just in contrast to what Malcolm was saying, when I was a boy, working to I associated working with steelworks and coal mines, yeah? And I used to play guitar at Flimby Miners Welfare and Siddick Miners Welfare, and all those have gone. So I think the idea that we're going to attract old industries, although I understand what Malcolm was saying, what I really like about the report is its focus on green sustainability. I would also highlight as well that if you looked at our neighbours in Carlisle, they're going to be building thousands and thousands and thousands of houses, right? We ourselves in Allerdale have got plans, so we need to be looking at construction, because at the minute there still is an awful lot of people that come in from outside the area. You talk to anybody in construction, they can't get local people. So I really welcome this report, and for me our focus should be on the way you keep young people is by a lot of the things in this report. And I think another thing that caught my eye was bigging up the area. It's a bit like Councillor Heaslip said before, that kind of thing about, aren't we, look at these areas of deprivation, look at the opportunities we've got and look how we can raise everybody up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Semple. Councillor McCadden-Holmes, would you like to come in? You got a question there, please, Carney?
Yeah, thank you. I'm relating to page 65, Chairman, in the past energy sector, and I want to cross-reference what I'm going to say into the 3 strategic priorities: the quality of place, business support, and physical space. And I do believe that there is potential for other towns, Cockermouth and Maryport, for marketing council-owned sites for the nuclear sector. The consultants, in my view, haven't truly looked at the broad opportunities for the borough in this. I want to remind the meeting that 2,000 people commute to Sellafield from Allerdale area, and it should not be ring-fenced for Workington alone. And when we come to look at this from a scrutiny aspect, how will we engage relevant witnesses to give evidence to this fact?
Thank you, Carney. Would you like to answer that, Nick, please?
Yeah, so in terms of, all the towns, part of the commission is to look at what the opportunities are within all the towns within Allerdale, and it will be looking at, in particular, what we can do utilising any assets that we maintain within those towns. So it's very much looking at it from a perspective of an asset-based delivery model, and looking at that whole range of opportunities. I think with the nuclear supply chain, there are obviously there are restrictions around how close some people have to be to site, and how close some people don't have to be to site, and obviously we can work through that. So I take the point that there are opportunities in all the towns. We will look at all of those. If there are any particular instances or any particular things that people want to draw to my attention within that report that they think needs tweaking or amending, then please do send them through.
Thanks, Nick. Do we have any questions, please? Councillor Heaslip. Mike, would you like to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. I don't want to spoil the party because I think actually it's a very good piece of work that that McDonald have done. I just will say when you read the small print, read it carefully, and actually it'd be handy if they put page numbers on it, because they produce cross references to page whatever, but there aren't actually any page numbers on their report. The only page numbers are the ones we've put on, I think, unless I'm missing it. So when they come to do the final report, it'd be handy if it had page numbers on, then we could cross reference it. But when you look at the detail, there are a few, not that many, just a few things where I think the consultants haven't quite properly understood the economic context of Allerdale in the way that you might have wanted them to. I'm not gonna list them here because I've already sent them to Nick, and I hope he'll pick up on them. But although it's a great piece of work, and I don't want to be a party pooper, as ever with consultants who parachute in from somewhere else, there are some aspects of the area that they don't actually get. You have to actually explain it to them that things don't quite work here exactly the same way they work in other places. They might have been doing and making assumptions based on experience elsewhere ain't necessarily the best way. But I've made those comments to Nick. I don't want to delay everybody with reciting them again here.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Do we have any other questions for Nick or Kevin, please? Can't see any coming there. And with that, I'd just like to thank you, Nick, Kevin, for coming along today and giving that presentation. I think, as Mike said, it is a good piece of work, and I think there's a lot of useful information there in terms of real detail, should we say. Some of them I found some of them quite alarming with regards to my report, I must admit, and I didn't realise. And I think it's probably something we can utilise at a later date moving forward. So with that, yeah, thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. And we'll close that item out if that's okay. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is item 9, which is the task and finish group updates and the inclusion of the response to the pandemic task and finish group report number 1. That's actually included within the agenda itself, and I'll just like to note the conclusion on that, really, in terms of the members have actually done their initial assessment and they're quite pleased, and with regards to how the actual work has been going by the officers and the relevant departments, and in terms of how they've been responding to the outbreak. And I believe this is going to be a continuing piece of work as the actual pandemic progresses. So it no means it's the end of this task and finish group. I think it's going to be a continuation. So I'd just like to thank Mike and his team for actually doing that piece of work. With regards to procurement group, their report is nearly ready for signing off. I think there's just a couple of comments come in, and I've got to accept responsibility for that, Ian. They are my comments that you're waiting for, so I've got to get them to you by Monday or Tuesday, so I'll take responsibility for that. But the report has virtually been complete, so hopefully that should come to the next meeting. And we have the future waste group, and that report is in, I believe, Ian.
I have written a draft. The group need to receive it and sign it off.
Yeah, I thought it was about complete. So all 3 of them are just about finished with. So that's good news. So that closes. Do we have any questions? I'll take any questions first. Sorry, Malcolm. Would you like to come in there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I had a crack with Ian before because Sally had been in touch with me of our procurement tax can finish, and I wondered if you had submitted your questions that you were going to put in last Monday.
Yeah.
I've
just apologised, Malcolm, for not doing it.
If you get everything in, so we can get it collated and wrapped up. I think it's gone on long enough again. And Carmel Bell, she's back in the chair now for it. So involve her as well, Ian, please.
Yeah, suitably chastised, Malcolm. Sorry.
Well done, lad. No, it's been good. It's been super. It's rattled some skeletons.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, lads.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eastleigh, Mike, would you like to come in? You got a question there, please?
A comment, if you don't mind, more than on the pandemic task and finish group report. The report is the report, and there it is. I would just like to draw members' attention to the second paragraph of the conclusion about the success of Allerdale Council's work, and it has been a success. The environmental health people have been doing the job, well, as one would expect. They've been doing it for 150 years in controlling infectious outbreaks of infectious diseases. But it all depends on the testing system working.
Yeah.
And we had some doubts about that at the time. And I think, from my perspective, personally, everything that I've seen about the testing system, the national testing system, since we had our meeting with our own environmental health team, has confirmed my worst fears that our staff are hamstrung by the, I would say failure is maybe too strong a word. Some people might call it failure, but certainly by the delays and problems they're getting in getting information through from the national testing system. So they're they're always on the back foot. They're behind the eight ball, you might say, in trying to control this stuff. And with the recent increase in outbreaks, and what I understand to be from experience of an outbreak in an organisation I was involved with, the increasing tendency when you contact Public Health England for them simply to say, oh, we can't cope with this, get on to your local council's environmental health department. So more and more and more work is being put onto our environmental health officers. And, they're coping so far, but I mean, they're almost working, 7 days a week on this.
Yeah.
We need to be concerned about the level of resource that we've got to support our environmental health team in doing the excellent job. They've been doing an excellent job so far, but we need to be careful that they don't get overwhelmed by the workload that's been pushed out from the from national level and pushed out in not a particularly helpful way, actually. So we just need to keep an eye on that, and I hope executive will look at the issue of resourcing our environmental health team to be able to cope with the fast increasing workload.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. We've received the report. Is that something you would like to add into this report, given its additional information, to carry forward to the executive?
Well, I think if we were going to make a recommendation to the executive, we would, I think, draw this report to their attention.
Yeah.
As an addendum to say that there is a level of concern about the increasing burden on the environmental health team and whether we've got the resources in place to sustain it, given that more and more of this work is being put onto local authorities.
Yeah. Ian, is that something we can update quite easily?
Yes, we can either change the report or simply forward it to the executive with a note, or indeed one of you as the chairs, and Councillor Heaslip was the chair of this group, could presumably go to executive and present that and make that point. I think it might just be worth noting, because I don't know if anybody else was watching on Sunday morning, but Cumbria got a mention on the Andrew Marr show of Cumbria's approach being an exemplar of how it works if you get the local teams involved in going out and actually going and basically knocking on people's doors. I think it came across slightly strangely because the reference was to the fact that it was the sexual health team that was doing it, which is true, because they've already, for obvious reasons, go out and knock on people's doors and sort of say, you know, by the way, here's something you need to know. But the fact that Cumbria was getting that special mention clearly means that people are taking notice of what's going on here and in other places that are doing that.
Can I just add something to that, Ian, if I may?
Yes.
I understand that in the early days, the sexual health team were doing that, but apparently they've now been withdrawn from COVID-19 work. So the entire burden is now falling on our environmental health officers. So that's something we need to be aware of. And if you want, I'd be quite happy to. Yeah. I don't think we need to amend the report. The report is the report as it was produced at the time. But I'd be quite happy if that were forwarded to executive with a note expressing the concerns I've just raised. And I mean, if they want me to go along and tell them camera to camera, I will do so.
Okay. No, that's fine. If you're happy with that, Mike.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Granger, Malcolm, have you got a question there, please?
I have, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I'm not in Mike's procurement group, task and finish group for COVID-19, but I give him 110%. We must keep at our exec to look after the environmental people. It's a really, really big must, and I do agree with you, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm. Do we have any further questions on that, please?
Councillor Daniels had his hand up, but I think it's gone down.
I just wanted to add to what you said, Ian, because there was a full 2-page article in the Sunday Times last week about how well Cumbria had done. And it seems a shame now that, as Mike said, that we're now not having the sexual health team doing it because they seemed like they were doing a bang-on job. There we go. What a shame.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Any other questions with regards to item 9 on the agenda? In that case, I'll close item 9 if that's okay. Thank you for that. Moving on, item 10. Item 10 and item 11 are regular items on the agenda for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and they are a fluid document. So my intention is to run through them on a page-by-page basis rather than on individual items. I'll run through a page. I'll give 5 seconds for any responses. So if people could raise their hand if they have a question or item that they wish to interrogate, just please raise your hand. If that's okay.
A couple of pages of the executive of the forward plan relate to the meeting that was held on Wednesday. A lot of the stuff relates to the executive meeting that was held on Wednesday. So those are now in the past. I think the page 182, I suspect is the first one that has got actually forward decisions on it.
Okay. Well, if we run through them page by page, Ian, if you can identify those that were have been considered, that'd be useful.
Okay, are we on 179? I just want
179, page 179 for the members.
So those relate to September, so those have already been dealt with.
Yeah.
180, those were all at executive on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Similarly, 181.
Yeah.
And then we get on to 182, as I say.
There's 2.
There are no dates on those first 2 items, but they are obviously exempt. And then we get on to accounts and yeah. So from 182, there are items that are obviously forthcoming.
Yeah. Okay. We'll start at 182, if that's okay with the members. Page 182. Okay. Page 183. Key decision pending. Councillor Granger, Malcolm, would you like to come in there, please?
But I want to go back to page 181, please, Ian. I couldn't get my mute button right.
No problem. Okay.
It's one for Kevin. Kevin, what's the problem at Reedland Business Park? What is the main problems? Please.
Yes, Councillor. So the issue is essentially that the ground conditions were significantly worse than originally anticipated on the basis of the desktop studies that were done at the initial stages of the project. So once we've got into the intrusive ground investigations, the condition of the ground has been such that it would have required enhanced foundation design and a lot of sort of removal of ground from site and replacement, and that has just increased the construction costs significantly beyond the available budget.
Thank you.
Okay, Malcolm.
Thank you. Spot on.
Thank you. We'll return to page 183. Page 184. Open both of them. Page 185. Page 186. Page 187. Page 188. Page 189. And finally, page 190. Okay. That concludes item number 10 on the agenda. Moving on to item 11, the work programme 2020 to 21. Pages 191 to 194. Again, another fluid document. We'll take it page by page. Again, I've got a question coming in there off Councillor Daniels. Alan, would you like to come in there?
Hi, I just wanted to talk about the housing strategy. I've been looking at this along with the government white paper. One of the things that I've looked at is that the plan by the new with the white paper that affordable housing will start not from 10 build but 40 builds, which is quite alarming. The other thing that we've noticed in the CA12 area, which mostly is in the national park, but the number of second homes and holiday lets in that area has risen from 29% in 2017 to now over 35% in that area, which is alarming to the people of Keswick and the smaller villages. I don't know what our strategy is to circumvent this problem, because it will only get worse as the people fleeing major towns looking for a safe place in rural areas. I just wondered what if that would be included in our housing strategy.
Is that a question we can carry forward? Who, Nick?
Yeah, if
on.
Councillor Daniels wants to get in touch, we can get in touch. But yeah. I mean, we need to. I think Lee's in the process of arranging a briefing for members on the white paper.
Yeah.
And I think that should go in the diary in the very near future on the plan and white paper.
Okay.
And then we need to start looking at setting some time and some budget aside to start doing all of the needs assessment that go alongside the development of a new housing strategy. So we'll be looking to do that towards the back end of the year.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Councillor Granger, Malcolm, you got a question, please?
Well, it's a question statement, but you get fed up with this affordable housing and affordable housing. What is an affordable house? And when you ask people, it's what the builder than what the council think is an affordable price. Well, I wish they'd lose that stigma and go for first-time buyer houses. And I think it's something that's going to be looked into, Nick, because it's getting to be more prevalent every year. An affordable house at Thursby on that new site was £254,000. That's a lot of money for an affordable house.
And I think you've got a fair point there, Morgan. I must admit, I couldn't disagree with the current assessment strategy, but I believe it's driven by national guidance, Nick.
Yeah, and it's wrong. I'm sorry, it's wrong.
Yeah,
it is, and I probably should know the definition off the top of my head, but I don't. But there is a standard definition for affordable housing. Kevin probably knows it. You'll be smiling there. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the plan and white paper, there is some stuff around first-time buyers in there. I think it was about 30% that we're looking at discounted price on them. So again, it's when we get that date in the diary, it's an opportunity for you to have some of those discussions with the plan and policy team.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Can I have a follow-on, Ian?
Yeah, would you like to?
I think an amendment to the white paper would be, instead of allowing people to buy the houses from out of the county, put a
stipulation on them.
Stipulation that it can be bought for people in a certain area, so that the people in the area could try and buy the house before somebody from away, because cash is getting to be really, really silly now. Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm. Councillor Daniels, Alan, you got another question coming in there, please?
Yeah, I can answer that question. Affordable housing is 80% of the average of the particular town you're in. So in Keswick, where the average price of a house is 375,000, the 80% of that is 280,000, which is not affordable at all. So you're quite right, Malcolm. It's a total nonsense. So we need to amend that and press government to change the plan. It's just a ludicrous situation.
Yeah, I think it's something we all agree with. I think. Thank you, Alan. Councillor Anderson, Tony, would you like to come in the question, please?
Yeah, it's just a comment, really. Just I'm going to sound like a villain of the piece here, but I live in Thursby, and they built a new estate, and they were sold. All of them were sold, and they're council tax providers. Okay,
yeah.
There's a difference between affordable housing, low-cost housing, and starter housing. You've got to define it, and that's got to be within a plan. But this vilification of house owners that have got expensive houses has got to stop. I'm a conservative, okay? I'm a meritocrat. And I firmly believe that we've got to create communities, not with a race to the bottom. We've got to provide for local people that can't live in the villages. And I think somebody commented, I can't remember, I think it was Alan, about holiday homes. We've got to start thinking about policies about, it's a national policy that has to have council taxes that reflect on second homes. If people have a second home, they've got to pay for it. They've got to pay for that privilege, and they've got to reflect their payment into local services that are provided. But to constantly vilify the housing estate at Thursby has been a huge success for the village. Okay, all the houses were sold. They're paying Band D and Band E council tax. They did put in low-cost housing at a substantial rate, but you've also got to think as well of the developers they won't develop anything unless there's a profit in it for them. And that sounds terrible against some of the socialist ideals some of the members have, but you've got to, these companies have got to build them, and they've got to get returns on the land. The land cost in Keswick is phenomenal, and they've got to get a return on that. So what we have to do with any development plan in the future is to take into account all of the local needs first and foremost, but you've got to reflect all of the activities therein. And Second Homes is a disaster in Coldbeck. It's a ghost town. Okay, Sebram's the same, and you know, you've got to have a policy that reflects that.
Thank you, Tony, for that. Councillor McCann-Ormes, Carney, would you like to come with the question, please?
It's just in relation to the talk about affordable housing. Brighton Council allowed itself to be bought out of that by the guy, I can't remember his name, he's the guy who won in the jungle. He was a former footballer, you know what I mean? Can anybody name him? You know what I mean? He's now a property developer, and he gave Brighton Council £500,000 to take that out, so there is no affordable housing and it can be bought out. And that's the very sad fact of building houses for people who need them to rent.
Thank you, Carney. Councillor Semple, Andy, would you like to make the question?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, well, just joining in this debate. I find myself, I'm worried about, I find myself agreeing a lot of time with Councillor Daniels, so as I've told him, so, but we represent the same area. But I think what this debate points out is the need for a joined up strategy. Councillor Granger and others were saying before about young people. How do we keep our young people? Yeah, I brought up my family here, right? And they earn the local wage, not Sellafield wages. They earn the local wage. How the bleeding heck can they ever afford? Although I'm trying to get one to marry a brain surgeon or whatever, 275 grand, right? So it's about having a policy that creates the right jobs that get, you know, it's the whole thing. You can't look. I mean, the whole planning thing. Yeah, it's good to have the cross-party discussions that we're having, but you've got to think about the whole thing. The biggest challenge we have is getting our young people on the housing market. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy, for that. Yeah, and I think it shows there are quite a few varied opinions on housing, and I think it's one of those things we could debate for quite a while. But I think they're all valid points, to be honest, and I think we have to be wise enough to consider each other's views when we're actually thinking about it.
The option is open to the committee to look at forming a smaller group, but obviously Nick already has the group that is looking at the economic growth strategy.
Yeah.
So I guess Nick is furiously taking notes in terms of this discussion around that. But that option is there if you wanted a special session at some point around that, because it's clearly something that people are interested in. I was going to say, as we're sort of on the work program and about to turn the page, perhaps, the option is also there because, as Nick mentioned earlier, about bringing the economic growth strategy back to the committee sometime later this year or early next year. Well, we've only got one more meeting this year at the moment.
Yeah.
You could potentially look at the idea of trying to squeeze in another meeting in December if that fitted, but we'd obviously have to work around that timing. But that, I guess, that is an option open to the committee, that if you wish to add a meeting, then I guess you can.
I think there's a strength of feeling there, to be honest, Ian, in terms of people and members would like to get their opinions across to get that feedback in. I'm not sure in terms of what Nick has actually got within his plan in terms of members and any communication and any consultation that he's actually undertaken with relevant members.
So I've got two things in mind at the moment, Chairman. So one is we've obviously, as Ian suggested there, we've got the policy working group.
Yeah.
So we can feed any conversations into there, and I can get Andrea Smith, our housing policy manager, to come along to that and to talk you through it. That's not a problem. And the second thing that I'm working on at the moment is that we're we're looking at the possibility of holding a kind of a policy conference, for want of a better phrase, for members. So I know there are a number of things that are happening at this moment in time and a number of policy areas where people are really interested in finding more about. And so the idea is that we'll maybe take a couple of hours and we'll provide people with a summary overview of a number of policy areas, and then we'll try and split people into rooms and you can get into a bit more detail into some of those.
Yeah.
So I've just written down that affordable housing and housing is one of those that we'll do on that particular day as well.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be useful, Nick, if you could. It sounds like a bit of an extension on a couple of the briefs that we had last month, you know, just a bit more involvement from what you're saying there, which will be a bit more useful. I think we can give a bit more feedback and get opinions incorporated within any discussions that we have and give you direct feedback as such.
Chair, just before you move on to other questions, Nick, I'm not sure how many people currently in this committee who've been making comments are part of that policy group. Have you are you able to include other people, or is that a closed group at the moment?
It's not a closed group. If anybody wants to be on the mailing list for that group and involved in the meetings, if they let me know, I will add them to the list.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. I've got a question in from Councillor Daniels. Alan, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Taking up from what Ian said, Nick, if you were thinking of forming a small group to talk about housing, you may not know, but I'm on Keswick Community Housing Trust, has built considerable amount of affordable houses in Keswick, and I have quite a bit of knowledge of that, and I would be quite interested in sitting down and talking with you or with as a group and getting some ideas from you and backwards and forwards. I've read the government white paper 3 times. We've actually, as a town council, we've submitted our report to the government, and it's a part of my big interest actually is housing. So I welcome the opportunity to sit down with you and a group or just yourself and maybe go over it and exchange some ideas if that's at all possible.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. I'm sure Nick's registered that. Councillor Heasley, Mike, would you like to come in with a question or statement, please?
Yeah, please. Thank you, Chair. I've been reluctant to try and squeeze another meeting in December, but looking at the agenda for the November, or the work program for the November meeting and the one for the January meeting, we've only got one item on each, and the only one November item, as far as I can tell, is the performance report, which we dealt with today in less than an hour. So I would suggest that there is scope within the November meeting, maybe within the January meeting, to slip another item in there if we need to.
Okay.
Just to suggest.
Yeah, we can take that away and discuss it at the co-chairs meeting, given what Nick's already offered. I think that might be useful, and I think it would be good for our members to be involved with that. I think it would be useful. Thanks, Mike. Councillor Granger, Malcolm, would you like to come with the question statement, please?
Nick, I did say I was going to come in on a group with you. I don't know, I missed 1 or 2 meetings. I've been very, very busy, but I'd still like to be involved. Is it too late to join you, or how do we stand?
No, you're still on the invitation list.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Malcolm. I think that was useful debate, actually, and it's probably captured something that quite a few people are passionate about, which is good. And we'll probably change the programme going forward, Ian, just for you.
Yes, but just to point out, Chair, we haven't actually looked at page 192. But
I know that I haven't finished yet. Mate. I'm okay. That concludes page 191. If you have any other questions, moving on to page 192. And finally, page 193. Okay. That concludes item 11. And that concludes.
I've got my hand up, Chair.
Sorry, I didn't realise you slipped it in late there, Mike. I've got a hand up, raised hand from Councillor Heasley. Mike, would you like to come in with a statement or a question?
Well, just a suggestion on the work programme that one of the things we have considered and have done in the past is run a budget task and finish group, and I really do mean finish group, not one that runs all year.
Okay.
But, a group that maybe meets in November at a key point in the budget making process that's not actually second guessing, but just is ensuring that we understand the basis on which the budget's been put together and can assure ourselves that the budget as constructed is actually delivering the priorities we've got in the council plan, because that's what it's supposed to do. So I think we just need to consider whether we do that, and if we're going to do that, seeing as this is October, if we're going to set up a budget task and finish group that might have, at most, I would suggest 2 meetings in November, then we need to do it now.
Yeah. Okay. I know that's something you've mentioned before, so it's something we can take on board, isn't it? Was it now October? Yeah. Okay.
Normally, I would write out and see who's interested.
Yeah.
Forgive me, but I'm not quite clear if Councillor Hislop suggesting that group is made up of members from this committee, or it can include other people. I can send out an invitation to other councillors to join that group. Normally that would come back and be approved. So as Councillor Hislop's rightly pointing out, the next meeting is towards the end of November. If the process is continuing through the latter part of November and the early part of December, that meeting is going to be too late to do that. So I guess you need to decide now if you're going to set something up.
Yeah. I think it's something that obviously Mike's discussed, and we've had discussions on it previously. I think it's something we should go with, and also offer out any invitations as well, noting that we have got a short time scale to adhere to, and if we can agree that up front in terms of any interested parties who come back or members who come back and wish to participate, we can agree that here up front, can't we?
I'm guessing you can, and I'm guessing you can presumably agree that you as co-chairs can maybe agree that membership outside this meeting, if that's
if people or members wish to put their names forward, they can do so now or outside the meeting. And if you can put it out to the wider membership, Ian, and if they want to come back and they show an interest, we can agree any members who do show interest can participate, I think, just to speed the process up.
If the committee,
if members are in agreement, of course.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Are you happy with that, Mike?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Anybody would like to catch me on the up when just before I close the meeting? No. In that case, no. Thank you for your attendance today. It's been really good. Enjoyed the debate in some places. It's been really good. It's been enlightening, some of the actual presentations, and I'd like to thank Nick, Alex, and Kevin for their participation today. It's been really useful, and also Lee. Thank you for giving the relevant guidance as well today. With that, I'd like to close the meeting and wish everybody a happy weekend.